thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. I hope everyone is staying well and healthy during these challenging times. As we gear up to head into the second half of the season, there's obviously a lot of positives that we can take away from our first 9 games. However, at this point, our focus is on a very important divisional game we have coming up this week against the Las Vegas Raiders. And I know that's where the coaches and the players' mindset is at this point. In addition to doing a nice job on the field, I want to compliment the players, the coaches, and our entire staff on the job that they've done managing through the pandemic. However, like our on-field performance, we're going to have to remain vigilant and humble if we want to stay healthy and achieve our goal of completing our season in Tampa for Super Bowl 55. I also want to acknowledge our great fans. Even though we've had only limited attendance at Arrowhead, our fans have done a great job of being loud and showing their support for the team. Finally, I think most of you at this point have seen the releases we issued a little bit ago confirming that we have extended Andy Reid's and Veach's contracts. I can't speak highly enough about the job the two of them have done in leading our football team. And I'm personally thrilled that both of them want to continue their time with the Chiefs and our collective pursuit of more world championships. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Let's go first to Bob Fesco. Go ahead, Bob.
Clark, obviously Andy's been with you for a while now, but how have you changed as an owner since the day you hired Andy Reid to where you guys are right now?
Well, the short answer is I smile a whole lot more. If you just think about the journey that we've been on over the last 8 years, when we hired Andy, we were obviously coming off of several very difficult seasons. The turnaround with Andy was almost immediate, going 9-0 his first season in Kansas City. And, to his credit, he's done nothing but get better. And that's helped our football team get better. Obviously, that crescendoed with the Super Bowl victory this past February. And I'm excited to look to the future because I don't think there's been any change in his energy level and just the way the players respond to him. They're excited to come to practice every day, excited to play for him, and fully on board with our goals to win world championships.
Let's go next to Adam Teicher. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, Clark. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Adam.
Good. Hey, I just want to say quickly, I really appreciate the note you sent. I hope Ted or Ryan said something to you about that, but I just appreciate that. And I wanted to congratulate you on today's news also. So what's your job on the football side of things now, just to get out of the way? But really, in all seriousness, can you share with us what your role is on the football side of things, how often you talk to Andy and talk to Brad, at least during the season? And Brad, I'll have one quick follow-up.
Yeah. So I talk to both of them every week. In a normal year, those might be in-person meetings, but this year there's been a lot of phone calls and Zoom calls. During the season, Andy's obviously very focused on each game coming up, and so our conversations tend to revolve around that. During the off season, it covers a whole lot more subjects. As you can imagine, this summer, Brett and I had many conversations about the contracts that we were working on, starting with our QB. And, that's really where I'll get involved with Brett and Andy is on the composition of the football team, on trades that they're interested in making, which players to sign and, how that fits into the salary cap.
Okay. And also, I was able to ask Mark Donovan a ticket question or two, but I wanted to ask you this. How much value is there for the Chiefs in selling tickets in the amount that you are this season? What's the value in that as opposed to no tickets at all?
Yeah. Well, financially, it's obviously better than having an empty stadium. But at the end of the day, it's not a huge amount of money. I think really the bigger value is for the organization, for the team and the players. I thinking having some fans in the stadium, and our fans, as I mentioned, have done a great job of being as loud as they possibly can, makes it feel it as normal as possible, makes the players feel like, hey, we still have a home field advantage. I also think there's some value in having fans this year as we look to next year. Because, unfortunately, I think COVID's going to be with us for a while. But the fact that we were able to have some fans this year, maybe we can build on that next year once we get to the season.
Let's go next to Pete Sweeney. Go ahead, Pete.
Hi, Clark. Thank you for taking some time with us today. As you think back to your dad moving the team to Kansas City and really the whole history of the franchise, just how critical was that decision to bring Andy Reid and by proxy Brett Veach on board in 2013, now that you can reflect back?
Well, when the Chiefs came to Kansas City back in 1963, they were fortunate to have what would be a Hall of Fame coach and also what would be a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I think we're in a similar position today. The value of a great head coach in the NFL cannot be overstated. I think in a lot of ways it's similar to the value of a great quarterback. It's really on the field. It's a quarterback league. And when you have the two of them together, you can have a lot of success. Just like Hank and Lynn did back then. Now we've got Andy and Patrick, working their magic almost on a weekly basis.
Let's go next to Sam McDowell. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Clark. You mentioned attendance. We saw it today with Philadelphia. They announced they're not going to be having fans anymore. Have there been any discussions with the way the pandemic is going right now about changing what you guys are doing for the last 3 home games about no longer having fans?
Yeah, the short answer is there's been no discussion about changing the plans for the last 3 games of the season. Obviously, everybody in Kansas City is concerned with the spike in cases. We have a conversation with the health director, Dr. Archer, on a weekly basis, just to review, what's happened at our most recent games and, what we can do to maybe improve the protocols on a go-forward basis. Right now, our expectation is that we'll have the same level of fans at those 3 games. But obviously, with COVID, things are very dynamic.
Let's go next to Nate Taylor. Go ahead, Nate.
Hey, Clark. This question is more about Brett. I think you probably had a pretty good idea with, 14 years of experience in Philadelphia, what you were going to get from Andy. But obviously seeing, Brett through the ranks, just what have you learned about him since you gave him the position to be the general manager and how he sort of led the team in that role?
Yeah. Clearly Brett's done an outstanding job. One of the things I think that's most important to the success that we've had is how he and Andy work together. And of course, they came with the pre-existing relationships from Philadelphia. So, that was something that I knew we were getting. But it's probably been better than I thought. That dynamic's really great. A lot of times you can have tension between your GM and head coach, but the two of them really work together hand in hand. When Brett became the GM 3.5 years ago, he had some areas that he had to grow into. He had to learn the cap management side of the business, and he's done a fantastic job on that. I think we can all say, we're surprised that he was able to accomplish everything that he was able to accomplish, this past summer in terms of re-signing our veteran players. I also knew that he was a really good evaluator, but it's one thing to be a good evaluator and another thing to be the guy sitting in the chair having to make the decisions, both on draft choices and free agents. And I think you can just look at the last couple of years at some of the marquee free agents that we've signed, how well they fit into the team, fit into the scheme, really helped us be better, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And then we're starting to see a lot of production from his draft choices. I always say that it takes you 3 or 4 years to really know what you have from a draft class. But the last 2 draft classes, those guys they're on the field and they're making a difference. So he's doing an outstanding job there. He's also done a great job managing his staff. I mean, there's a reason they call that position general manager. There's a lot of things to manage. This year, more so than ever because of the complications from COVID. And Brett's always thinking ahead. He's proactive, finding solutions before the problems emerge, and just really has done an outstanding job all the way around and exceeded my expectations.
Let's go next to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks for the time, Clark. And you mentioned a little bit about, Brett right there. And I know when you hired him, you mentioned that he was a people person, and that was a big part of the hiring him and what you liked about him. I'm curious, one, what were kind of your first impressions of Brett before that, even going back to when you first heard about him and first met him? And what's the one thing, I know you listed some things off there, what's the one thing you've learned about Brett the last 3.5 years that surprised you?
Well, I'm not sure that there's any one thing that's surprised me. I think one thing that's been a revelation, maybe for all of us, is how aggressive Brett is, and he's aggressive in what I'll say a conservative way. His decision making when he's being aggressive is very well thought out, and I think that's really paid dividends for us. Whether it was making trades for key players or signing free agents or figuring out how to get Patrick and Chris done this summer. I think that really, it serves him well, and it serves us well also.
Looks like we have 4 hands left. We'll go down the line, starting with Robert Rimson. Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, Clark. So having what you guys believe to be one of the best head coaches in the league and one of the best GMs in the league, it's kind of rare for a team to have that. How much do you contribute that to, like, sort of luck and sort of having a great organization that you're able to develop guys like Veach and bring in guys like Andy Reid?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would use the word luck, but I certainly feel fortunate most days to know that we have Andy Reid and Brett Veach leading the football side of our operation. And I think I would throw Mark Donovan in there as well, our president, even though most of his responsibilities are on the business side. We have a great leader in each of those positions, and the three of them really, really work well together. And that's an unusual place to be. I do think if you hire great people, those people will in turn hire great people. And I think if you look at their staffs, if you look at Andy's staff, he's got an excellent staff. Same thing with Brett. If you look at the players that they brought in, many of them are not only outstanding players, but they're also great leaders in our locker room, and they're making the guys around them better. So I think there's a virtuous circle that you get there when you have the right people at the top. And certainly that all started with hiring Andy 8 years ago.
Let's go next to Bob Fesco. Go ahead, Bob.
Clark, when you first met with Andy and had the opportunity to talk to him and really try to convince him that Kansas City was the spot, he had other opportunities, obviously. What do you think it was about what you guys did, what you guys said that convinced him that, yeah, I'm coming to Kansas City?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. Andy and I actually had a laugh about that this past week because that interview was scheduled for 3 or 4 hours, and Andy literally had an airplane waiting outside that was going to take him to the West Coast for a couple of other interviews, and we ended up going 9 hours, and he canceled those meetings. It's probably a better question for Andy, but what I would say from my standpoint is the chemistry was fantastic. Just right away, we could tell we really had a rapport. And as best you can in a first interview, it seemed like the two of us would work well together. And certainly that's played out over the last 8 years. Andy's a tremendous person to work with. He's very strong-willed, very strong-minded, but he's somebody who's always putting the best interests of the team ahead of his own.
Let's go next to Darren Smith. Go ahead, Darren.
Hey, Clark. First of all, thank you again for doing this. Couple questions for you. How easy is it for you as a businessman, as a smart businessman, to make these type of contract signing extensions, whether it's with the quarterback or the head coach, Brett Veach, obviously after winning a Super Bowl, so you know that your money's well invested. And then second, a little off subject, but I know you and the rest of your owners unanimously, voted to approve of like a minority draft incentive. How much of that is going to play into effect that, I know you want to retain talent, but you also want coaches like Eric Bieniemy to have an opportunity to coach, become a head coach in the NFL and also get compensated for it in return?
Yeah. Well, starting with the first question, post Super Bowl, it was pretty easy to say, we want Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Brett Veach to be in Kansas City as long as possible. Getting the timing right on when to do those extensions, getting the contract to work from Patrick's standpoint, but also the rest of our team needs in terms of salary cap space. That was really the challenge there. With Brett and Andy, probably the biggest challenge was the fact that we were going into COVID. And it was just an unusual time. And we wanted to deal with the players first before we got around to dealing with their extensions. But it was not a hard decision at the end of the day for me to extend the two of them. So we're glad to have that done and glad to have them on for the long term. With regard to the minority hiring incentive that the league passed last week, I think it's really a smart change. I think it's something that will incentivize organizations to develop talented minority candidates who hopefully can go on to being a head coach or general manager in the league. If you look at Andy and Brett and the way they run their operation, it's not an incentive that the two of them needed because they've already taken those kind of steps. And of course, as you referenced, we have Eric Bieniemy, sitting in a spot where he's likely to have some more opportunities to interview for a head coach at the end of the year. So, from a Chiefs standpoint, I don't think we needed it, but from a league standpoint, I think it's a really good dynamic.
And we'll go last to Vahe Gregorian. Go ahead, Vahe.
Thanks, Brad. Hi, Clark. Hey, just regarding Andy, one thought. You obviously had vetted him pretty well. You had that great chemistry that first day, but I do wonder if you didn't discover a few things about him these last few years that had more to do with the success than maybe you might have imagined. And Brad, if I could ask a follow-up on something else.
Yeah, well, I think we all know how unusual it is for an individual to be a successful head coach in the NFL for as long as Andy's been doing it, over 20 years. There are a lot of coaches that at one point in their career, they have a lot of success, but for some reason, they can't repeat it. The thing I've seen from Andy is tremendous consistency in how he approaches his job every day, every year, every football season. I'm sure he would tell you that there are ways that he's grown, and clearly what we see on the field, his creative mind is always coming up with new plays. But I think the core principles that he has in terms of his beliefs about how you build a football team, how you coach a football team, how you build a staff and manage that staff, I think those are the same that he's had for a long time. And I've heard him talk about some of his mentors over the years and, how he learned those things from them. And he really just has adopted it and made it his own, mantra to lead that way, I guess is probably the best answer there.
Thanks. And the other thing is a little bit more just pertinent to this week. Assuming you were too young to remember the Raiders-Chiefs brawl in 1970, I do wonder what your first consciousness was of their place in the universe for the Chiefs.
Well, pretty young, I learned that if you were a Chiefs fan, you didn't like the Raiders. And I'm not sure whether it was my dad that taught me that or maybe our fan base taught us that. I certainly, remember some of those early rivalry games, and I've seen the tape, obviously, from that 1970s game where that was, there was a big fight. And that was the Raiders, style back then. They were sort of the bad guys, and I know that's how we looked at them. I think part of having a great rivalry is the other team has to be very successful, and the Raiders over the years have had a lot of success. They're having a great year this year. Obviously, they're the one blemish on our record at this point, and I think it points to a really heated and important game out in Las Vegas this weekend.